Part 24. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, reborn. I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince. Author, Gigi. Chapter 251. Zhang Lianzi nodded. If it were him, this is really possible. Shen Yu thought about it and said, I still can't understand this person. Xiao Chuan could understand every word, but he didn't know what they were talking about. He couldn't help but interjected, but isn't King Yan an idle king? Quan Sheng Jingdu knows. Xiao Chuan put it euphemistically, the so-called idle king is just a playboy who has no knowledge, no skills, and nothing. Shen Yu glanced at him and said, this is the strength of Li Jiafeng. Everyone thinks he is an ignorant playboy, but I have tested him and found that he has martial arts skills and is not weak in kung fu. What? Xiao Chuan said in shock, he is good at what level? I'm not weaker than you in kung fu, Shen Yu said. Xiao Chuan felt that he was hurt, and none of the dudes in his eyes were worse at kung fu than him. Shen Yu did not mince words and said directly, if he is just trying to save his life, being a real trash is much safer than being a fake trash. If he says that he is hiding his talents just to protect himself, I don't believe it. It makes me uncomfortable. The answer is, if he wants to take action, why wait until now? When we leave Beijing, it is obviously his best time. Zhang Lianzi's eyes seemed to be immersed in ink. He looked at Shen Yu and said, when I was in Beijing, King Yan had a good relationship with Emperor Yongning and often went to the palace. Emperor Yongning also spoke up to protect King Yan when his officials impeached him. Zhang Lianzi suppressed his cough for a long time, but after saying a few words, he coughed even harder. The maids were all escorted out. Cao Guangjin looked left and right, and had no choice but to bring water to Zhang Lianzi himself. Sir, please slow down. Zhang Lianzi moistened his throat and continued, Zhang has some humble opinions. If the princess is willing to listen, I can explain a few things. Shen Yu said, Master Zhang, please speak. Zhang Lianzi looked at Cao Guangjin and said, Master Cao, please go ask me about today's medicine. How could Cao Guangjin not understand? There were some words he didn't want him to hear. He didn't really want to know. The more people knew, the shorter their lives would be. He had been immersed in officialdom for decades and relied on being a man of his own. He would not get involved if he could. After Cao Guang went out and closed the door, Zhang Lianzi said, in fact, the power in the court is now divided into three groups. One is the supporters of Emperor Yongning, and the other is the relatives headed by the Chu family. The four aristocratic families are closely related to each other. The Zhang family has always he is the head of the family, and the Chu family is the last. However, since Emperor Yongning came to the throne, the balance of the four major families has been broken. The Chu family wants to dominate the family by riding on Emperor Yongning's trend, and suppresses other families. Let's talk about the third one. The third one is the old ministers who were at a disadvantage during the change of imperial power. They originally supported the former prince. After the defeat of the former prince, they could not be reused. However, the court was short of people, so this group of old ministers were still in the court. As an official, although his official position is not high, he is still a powerful force. Xiao Chuan didn't understand, but they are all trivial officials, what role can they play? Zhang Lianzi explained, it's like building a palace. The floor tiles are not as eye-catching as the beams and columns, but the floor tiles can cover the entire hall. When he said this, Xiao Chuan understood. Zhang Lianzi said, as far as I know, this inconspicuous force once wanted to join King Yan, but it seems that there was no consensus. After finishing speaking, he saw Shen Yu looking at him. Shen Yu was examining the person in front of her. She had previously told Zhang Lianzi that he did not understand his late wife, but now she had to admit that she did not understand Zhang Lianzi either. Zhang Lianzi has been said to have lived 2 lives, and in his previous life he was a very popular minister like his grandfather. It is obvious that such a person has a deep mind and a vicious vision. To say it is a humble opinion would be too modest. Zhang Lianzi is a natural-born counselor. Fortunately, he has no intention of fighting for power and gain in this life. Otherwise, such a person would definitely not be allowed to stay. Shen Yu withdrew her gaze and said, "You mean that Li Zhaonian's coma must be caused by these 3 forces?" Zhang Lian nodded, "We might as well eliminate them one by one. The world is full of hustle and bustle, all for profit. Anyone who can profit from it will be suspected." Shen Yu thought for a while. The people who support Emperor Yongning can be ruled out for the time being, but now that Li Zhaonian is in his prime, it is the time when the Chu family is taking advantage of the East Wine to rise rapidly, so it is a bit far-fetched for the Chu family to take action against him. "That's wrong." Zhang Lianzi shook his head and said, "You are not in Shengjing, so you don't understand many things. Emperor Yongning rejected the proposal to establish the Queen 3 times. It seems that Emperor Yongning and the Queen are not of the same mind." Shen Yu looked at Zhang Lianzi and said, "Li Zhaonian had long thought that the dictatorial power of his relatives would reappear, but he was unable to change it. When the late emperor granted the marriage to the Chu family, he did not expect that Li Zhaonian would eventually take this position. The Chu family was the late emperor gave Li Zhaonian the life-saving talisman, but now he is being controlled by others." Zhang Lianzi said, "Li Zhaonian has a clear understanding of the situation, but a person like him is only suitable to be a counselor, not to control the country. We might as well make a bolder guess. Emperor Yongning has only one heir so far, who was born to the queen." Shen Yu was horrified. If the Chu family wanted to help the infant prince ascend to the throne, then Li Zhaonian would become a waste. "It can only be said that fate plays tricks on people," Zhang Lianzi said. He looked at the closed window, wondering whether he was sighing for Li Zhaonian or for himself. Xiao Chuan listened half understanding, thinking that it was no wonder that a powerless civil servant could manipulate the court. He felt that he understood, but he felt that he did not fully understand. Zhang Lianzi pinched the handkerchief and covered his lips for a moment, then said, "Since King Yan can find a way to win over the direct descendants, it means that he is not so easy to control. This is a game between him and the Chu family." Shen Yu didn't care about the situation in the DPRK, but she cared about the impact it would have on their current situation. Now that she has analyzed the situation, she can prepare in advance. After the conversation was over, Shen Yu stood up and left. "Princess, stay," Zhang Lianzi suddenly said. Shen Yu saw that he had something to say alone, so she turned her head and said to Xiao Chuan, "Go and wait for me outside." Zhang Lianzi and Shen Yu were the only ones left in the room. The charcoal stove was lit in the room and it was very warm, but Zhang Lianzi's face was pale and his lips were still black and blue. He had not recovered from being frozen in the snowy night. Zhang Lianzi smiled slightly, "I didn't expect that we could still talk like this now. What do you have to say?" "Sit down." Zhang Lianzi stared into her eyes. "I want to say that if the Yan Liangwan dilemma can be solved, what you and Xie Yun will suffer from is internal distress. I have some opinions of my own, and I hope I can help." "To you?" Shen Yu did not sit down. "Why?" "No reason." Zhang Lianzi moved his eyes away. "Maybe integrating myself into the situation will make me feel alive. With all due respect, if you want to eliminate civil strife and seek the world, in my opinion, you need to win over the public, defeat the few to control the chaos. Shen Yu narrowed her eyes and said with overwhelming force, "Who told you that we want to conquer the world?" The earliest word comes from the 6 Taoist proverbs written by the Pre-Qin dynasty. Later, it appeared and spread in chapter 129 of historical records by Sima Qian, a famous historian and writer in the Western Han dynasty. From The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince. Author, Gigi. Chapter 252. Zhang Lianzi was unmoved. Even if you don't have this intention, you have been pushed on this road. Li Zhaonian cannot control the country. If no one stands up, there will be endless civil strife. And you are already walking on this road, on the road to calming down the chaos. Shen Yu pursed her lips. Zhang Lianzi smiled and said, "You are not so naive as to think that after you calm down the civil strife, there will be others who can sit firmly in that position, right? Who in the world can be convinced? You have already made a choice, can you make it? You can stand by and watch the world become chaotic, so Shen Yu, you have no other way to go." Shen Yu had never thought about that level, or in other words, she was avoiding thinking about that level. Zhang Lianzi, if your opinion is still about strategy, I don't want to hear it. Zhang Lianzi was interrupted by Shen Yu as soon as he opened his mouth. If you have any ideas that can help solve the dilemma at Yanliang Pass, I would be happy to ask for your advice. That's all right. Zhang Lianzi cleared his throat. I can't help you with the art of war, but if you can't stand it anymore and want to negotiate a peace, I'm willing to do my best. I won't let that happen. As the door opened and closed, a gust of cold wind came in, which was blocked by the screen. Zhang Lianzi stared at the direction Shen Yu left in trance. For a long time, he laughed to himself. Until this moment, he himself had not been able to understand why he said those words to her and analyzed the situation with her. When Shen Yu walked into the courtyard, Xiao Chuan followed immediately. "Princess, Emperor Yongning is unconscious, could it be?" "This is exactly what I'm worried about," Shen Yu said. "With the changes in the political situation, I'm worried that we will be attacked from both sides." Xiao Chuan cursed and asked, "Isn't there another letter? Is it also about Sheng Jing?" Shen Yu shook her head. "It's my brother's home letter." Xiao Chuan looked happy. "Is General Shen coming? I happen to have something to ask him about the art of war." Shen Yu said, "We'll talk about it when we get back. It has been colder these past 2 days, so Changliu and Sixi were not idle either. They cleaned up a room and set up tables and chairs for Shen Yu to use for daily discussions. It was said to be a family letter, but Shen Yu didn't hide it and took it out directly to Xiao Chuan. After Xiao Chuan read it, he folded the letter and handed it to Shen Yu, wondering, "General Shen said in the letter that he was going to Chaihe. Didn't he come to Yanliang Pass? Why are he going to Chaihe?" Shen Yu didn't have answers to the series of questions. "Yes," Shen Yu murmured, "what is he doing in Chaihe?" Xiao Chuan thought for a while. Could General Shen want to borrow troops from Chaihe? I don't think it's possible. I know my father best. It's impossible for him to borrow troops from abroad. No, that can't be the case. Shen Yu tapped her fingers on her knees. It was obviously Yanliang Pass that was trapped, so what was Shen Zhao's purpose in going to Chaihe? Shen Zhao would not do unnecessary things, he must be trying to rescue Yanliang Pass. But she didn't think Shen Zhao would borrow troops. He had been guarding the border longer than Shen Yu, and was the general brought out by Shen Zhongan. He must have a plan, Shen Yu thought to herself. Xiao Chuan scratched his head. This is too difficult to guess. Why doesn't General Shen just write it down and let people guess? Shen Yu said calmly, he should be worried that there will be something wrong with the letter on the way, so he can't mention it in the letter. What is it? Shen Yu read the letter over and over many times, roasting it in the fire and staining it with vinegar and water, but she still had no clue. This is the Chaihe camp, surrounded by a solid earthen wall mixed with loess and straw, surrounded by towering watchtowers, and the general's tent is located in the center of the camp. The land here is vast, sparsely populated, and materials are scarce. No food can be grown in the loess. It is a place where birds do not poop. The man sitting on the chair looked at Shen Zhao with eager eyes. The man is Xiao Chuan's brother Xiao He, and his left arm is still wrapped with gauze. He was seriously injured in the previous battle with 11 Ju, and he has not been able to fully recover for such a long time. Shen Zhao was not looking at him, but at the person sitting in the middle seat. That was the person who could make the decision. General Xiao, Shen Zhao said, I know that General Xiao can't trust me now, but you might as well listen to my opinion. Yanliang Pass and Chaihe are both on the northwest border. General Xiao and I, the Shen family army, have fought against the Zihu people for many years. We can be said to be brothers. General Xiao must understand the truth of death and coldness. Once Yanliang Pass is lost, this line of defense will be broken. Xiao Changfeng knew very well how difficult Yanliang Pass was today. He was silent for a moment. Of course I understand this truth, but our troops are limited and we cannot spare the extra troops for reinforcements. If we move troops, the Zihu people may, if we choose to enter Dazhu from Chaihe, we cannot lead our troops to follow the footsteps of the Zihu people and chase them back and forth on the border. No one can afford it. Only when we are sure that the Zihu people will not attack Chaihe again can we support them. Yanliang Pass. Junior understands General Xiao's concerns. The hot tea in Shen Zhao's hand was almost cold and he didn't take a sip. He said, but Yanliangwen can't afford to wait. Xiao Changfeng pondered for a moment. Your father is a man who taught 2 generals. Your sister just defeated the Zihu people twice at Yanliang Pass. She is very capable. She is the princess of Balin. As long as Balin enters the truce period, Xie Zhou will definitely with reinforcements. As long as she survives the current predicament, everything will be solved. Shen Zhao had a serious expression on his stiff face, but she couldn't survive it. The first 2 small victories were the Zihu people testing the waters, and they were not considered real battles at all. There were more than 30,000 garrison troops at Yanliang Pass, 10,000 of them. The recruits recruited this year are not capable of combat at all. Then what do you want, Xiao He asked. Xiao He was dissatisfied with Shen Zheduo. They were both generals, and Shen Zhao's name and military merit were much higher than his, which made him appear to be inconspicuous. In the past, he often had the feeling that he could not be distinguished even if he was a good person. Shen Zhao then glanced at Xiao He and then looked away. The Zihu army is pressing down on the border. This time all the troops are dispatched. What they want to do is not Yanliang Pass. It's not as simple as grabbing food in the past. Otherwise, they would have launched a general attack long ago. But it has been delayed until now. He lowered his voice. I think they may want to occupy Yanliang Pass and the land within the pass this time, and make Ganzhou their permanent granary. Before Xiao Changfeng opened his mouth, Xiao He said, this is all just your guess. It is indeed my guess, Shen Zhao said, I am just analyzing the situation. You may or may not believe it, but one thing is that the battle must be fought. Xiao He was gagged by Shen Zhao and felt unhappy. He snorted coldly, you speak so plausibly, do you have a solution? Shen Zhao said, all the troops in Zihu are stationed at Yanliang Pass. They have not attacked because they are waiting for an opportunity. But in my opinion, they waited wrongly and gave us the opportunity. Xiao Changfeng's eyes were keen. What opportunity? An opportunity to go deep into the hinterland of Zihu. No, Xiao He stood up, Dad, let's. Xiao Changfeng raised his hand to interrupt. This idea was so unbelievable that Xiao Changfeng fell into deep thought. Shen Zhao, have you ever thought that if we enter the hinterland of Zihu, the border will be even more vulnerable? If they choose to enter Dazhu from Chaihe, tell me, who will stop? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, Reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince. Author, Gigi. Chapter 253. Then make them afraid to do it. Shen Zhao's eyes showed a cold look. Once we enter the hinterland of Zihu, Boda will not leave our family alone. He will definitely come back with reinforcements. We will press forward. No one except Boda's army can tear apart our line of defense, so Chai-He in the rear does not need the garrison of the army at all. It's so whimsical, Xiao-He said sarcastically, you are a good brother. This way the dilemma of Yanliang Pass is solved, but what about our soldiers? Once Boda returns to help, we will be trapped and die in Zihu hinterland. Shen Zhao glanced at him lightly. What if my sister leads troops to pursue Boda when she withdraws her troops? Xiao He was stunned for a moment, he didn't expect this level for a moment. He turned to look at Xiao Changfeng, wanting to say something, but seeing Xiao Changfeng lowering his head in deep thought, he did not dare to interrupt. Shen Zhao said, the total strength of all the troops along the northwest line is not very different from that of Boda. They were only dispersed because the front was stretched too long. We have been too passive in these years. They invaded us to meet the enemy. Here we have to defend ourselves wherever we go, but we never want to concentrate our forces to fundamentally solve the problem. Xiao He argued with him without giving in. The way of fighting deep into the hinterland of Zihu is different from our current way of fighting. The deployment of troops, food, grass, and armaments will consume much more. How can we not spend money? Your father has a great reputation. The funds for any year are not allocated to you first, and then it is our turn to take the rest. The military funds allocated by the court are not enough at all. My father keeps adding money to it every year, and the village has been sold out. You know the difficulties of the Xiao family army. Fart. Xiao He said he was excited, and he didn't speak lightly or seriously. He glanced at Xiao Changfeng hurriedly. Who doesn't have difficulties? Shen Zhao said sarcastically, I might as well tell you that since the 13th year of Tongxiu, my sister has used dowry to make up for the food and salary shortages of the Shen family army. How old was she in the 13th year of Tongxiu? At that time she's only 11. Xiao He was speechless for a moment, and threw the armband in his hand to the ground. What the hell are we guarding? Xiao He, Xiao Changfeng scolded sternly. Xiao He was holding back a fire in his heart with nowhere to vent, so he opened the curtain and left the military tent. The tent was quiet for a moment. Shenzhe Dao, I know that General Xiao and my father have the same strategy, which is to guard against death and minimize losses. In recent years, the people of the Zhou dynasty have not been able to make a living, and there is no money for us to go deep. Before I left, I had discussed with the Lu family in Hezhu. This year the military expenses will be borne by the Lu family. The cotton-padded clothes made by the Lu family are already on the way and 40,000 pieces have been allocated to Chai-He. Xiao Changfeng glanced at Shen Zhao, do you want to use this to bribe us? What if I don't agree? Regardless of whether we can form an alliance this time, the cotton clothes will still be given. This is a gift from my grandmother to the general after hearing about Chai-He's situation. It has nothing to do with me. It's all said and done, and there's no point in talking nonsense. Shen Zhao waited quietly. After a while, he seemed to know the answer while waiting, and drank the cold tea in the cup. After a long time, Xiao Changfeng raised his head and said, the plan you mentioned is feasible, but the risk is too high. I can't let the soldiers take this risk with you. Shen Zhao had already guessed from Xiao Changfeng's attitude that he would not agree. He said, the great Zhou dynasty is gradually declining. The Western Zhou has been a hidden danger to the great Zhou dynasty for decades, and it is getting stronger day by day. They are eyeing the land of the great Zhou dynasty. There are already enough soldiers buried in this place. Why not attack in one fell swoop and at least get 10 years of peace? 10 years, Shen Zhao said word by word. 10 years, how much time can it give us to breathe? When the troops and horses are strong, how can foreign enemies dare to invade again? Young man, Xiao Changfeng said solemnly, you think too simply. We don't know the terrain of the hinterland of Zihu, but the Zihu people are very familiar with their territory. How can you break this? I can't guarantee that it can be broken, Shen Zhao said truthfully, but right now, does General Xiao have any other better way? Or we can wait for reinforcements from Balin. If we wait, everyone will be happy. If we can't wait, we will be happy. Then when the Zihu people flatten Yanliang Pass and enter the hinterland, and we have to abandon Chaihe to go for reinforcements, then the Yanliang Pass city will be destroyed and people will be killed, but there will be no more 80,000 troops on both sides combined now. When Shen Zhao saw that Xiao Changfeng was silent, he added, General Xiao, my sister is the princess of Balin. Yanliang Pass is not her responsibility. She eliminated the rebellious parties in Shengjing and got a piece of paper to express her gratitude, but she did not retreat. Yan Liangguan, when Liangguan was in trouble, she still rushed thousands of miles to come to support. To put it mildly, she was a woman, and she tied her head to the waistband of her pants like men. Needless to say, we men should not end up with a woman. Not as good as anything. Thinking of Shen Yu, Shen Zhao's eyes suddenly turned red. He raised his head slightly and said, who can win every battle since ancient times? Who is not fighting? She dares to risk her life to fight, but we have to huddle in the camp. My sister and I were brought out by my father. We came from the same camp. She is willing to fight, and as a brother, I will not back down. Shen Zhao stood up and said, I understand General Xiao's doubts, and I won't force you. I will leave with my soldiers tomorrow. If you have troubled me, I will say goodbye. Shen Zhao saluted Xiao Changfeng respectfully, turned around and left without looking back. The cold air whizzed in through the cracks in the door curtain. Xiao Changfeng looked at the shaking door curtain and didn't move again for a long time. Cao Guangjin got off the sedan at the city gate and walked towards the temporary meeting hall. The snow on the ground was frozen after being trampled hard. He stepped hastily, his fat and bloated body staggered, and he fell to the ground. As soon as he was helped up, he pointed at the soldiers and scolded them. I don't even know how to shovel the snow. If the princess falls, who of you can bear it? Why don't you send someone to shovel the snow? After saying that, he hurried forward and shouted as he got closer, Princess, Princess, it's not good, something big has happened. Approaching the meeting hall, Chang Lu at the door sideways blocked Cao Guang from entering. What do you want from our princess? Cao Guangjin knew that this boy could talk no matter how big or small, but Shen Yu was very spoiled by him and Shen Yu didn't care. Naturally, Cao Guangjin didn't dare to go overboard. I have an urgent matter with the princess. There's something urgent going on inside, Chang Liu said. The door behind Chang Liu opened, and Shen Yu walked out. What's the matter? Cao Guang hurriedly said, Princess, Master Zhang came with an imperial edict to negotiate peace, but the peace has not yet been negotiated. Master Zhang suddenly said that he wanted to return to Shengjing. The lower officials could not stop him. Princess, please go and persuade him. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, Reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince author, Gigi. Chapter 254. Cao Guangjin was afraid that Zhang Lian would die in his house, but he was even more afraid that the Zihu people would suddenly invade. What he was worried about was that if Zhang Lianzi left, who would come forward to negotiate a peace? Whether Zhang Lianzi returns to Shengjing or not does not have much impact on Shen Yu. However, Zhang Lianzi was lifeless the day before and looked like he wanted to escape into Buddhism. How could he want to return to Beijing temporarily? I understand, Shen Yu nodded. Cao Guangjin, then. Shen Yu said, Master Cao will go back first. Master Zhang is an official of the imperial court. He is free and I can't control him. Cao Guangjin was so anxious that he wanted to stamp his feet, but when he saw that Shen Yu looked like it had nothing to do with him, he had no choice but to turn around and leave. Shen Yu took 2 steps back and stopped at the door. After thinking for a moment, she turned around and headed towards Cao Guangjin's house. A carriage was already parked at the door of Cao's mansion. The maids ran in and out to get things and tried to make the carriage as comfortable as possible. Seeing Shen Yu, the maids stepped aside one after another and knelt down to salute. As soon as Shen Yu walked into Zhang Lian's courtyard, she heard Cao Guangjin's voice. "It's a long way to go, and your body hasn't recovered yet. It's better to wait until your body feels better before leaving." Zhang Lianzi's voice was still weak. "It doesn't matter, it's the same as recuperating on the road." But Cao Guangjin wanted to persuade him again, but Zhang Lianzi had already seen Shen Yu coming in. "Master Cao, please go back first. The princess and I have something to say." Shen Yu knew from the moment she saw the carriage that Zhang Lianzi was preparing to leave immediately. He had already changed his clothes and was wrapped in a thick cloak. His face was still pale and he was so weak that he seemed to faint in the next moment. "I thought you wouldn't come," Zhang Lianzi said. "I left a letter and explained the situation in the letter. Now that you are here, I will tell you bluntly, and it can be better than what was written in the letter." "Clear?" Shen Yu asked. "You left in such a hurry, did something happen to Sheng Jing?" Zhang Lianzi nodded slowly and handed a letter to Shen Yu. Shen Yu read the letter and listened to Zhang Lianzi's words. "Emperor Yongning is awake. I'm afraid the person who asked you for information woke up just after he left Shengjing. But his condition is very bad. The imperial doctor is helpless and his relatives are forcing him to Emperor Yongning establish the throne." "Did Li Zhaonian compromise?" "Compromise, but no compromise," Zhang Lianzi said. "He established King Yan as the emperor's younger brother." "What?" Shen Yu raised her head and said in surprise. "He has a son at his knees, so his relatives can't agree." Li Zhaonian was in the Forbidden Palace, and Superintendent Shang Shan was responsible for all meals. Of course, his own people were placed in such an important position. No one can pull the strings in the middle, except the people closest to him. Shen Yu couldn't imagine how desperate Li Zhaonian must be at this moment. He was a person with a clean heart. After being pushed to that position, everyone around him was blinded by power and turned into a monster with only interests and power in his eyes. Zhang Lianzi said calmly, "That's right. They poisoned Emperor Yongning with the intention of killing him. They didn't expect that he would wake up, so they could only force him to become the heir. Emperor Yongning is really a smart man. Just not that lucky." Shen Yu frowned. "What's the situation in the court now?" "The court is divided into two factions. One faction supports the infant crown prince, and the other faction supports Li Jiafeng. The rest are waiting to see what happens." Zhang Lianzi added. "The elder of the pavilion wrote a letter to the official and angrily denounced his relatives in the court. After that, he became ill." Shen Yu knew why Zhang Lianzi left suddenly. Zhang Yuanqing was his grandfather. Now that the old man was seriously ill, his grandson really should go back. Zhang Lianzi was quite keen and had already guessed what she was thinking. "Your guess is correct. 1. My grandfather is seriously ill and I should go back. 2. He paused for a moment and looked at Shen Yu seriously. "When I go back, I can stabilize the situation for you." Shen Yu didn't show her surprise on her face, she just looked at Zhang Lianzi carefully. "I don't trust you as a person." Zhang Lianzi laughed. He already knew the answer. "It doesn't matter, whether you believe it or not, I will do what I want to do. If you are worried about me going back to disturb the situation, you can kill me now and die here in your hands. I deserve to die." Shen Yu pressed the letter on the table. Zhang Lianzi said again, "Since you are not going to kill me, I have to leave. The situation may change even a minute later." When Shen Yu didn't answer, he stood up. Gao Jin hurriedly stepped forward to help him and walked to the door. Zhang Lianzi stopped and looked back, but only saw half of Shen Yu's profile. Zhang Lianzi raised his feet and walked out. He thought a lot from that night on. he kept thinking that the past cannot be recalled. Shen Yu in the previous life died in the ice lake, and Zhang Lianzi in this life also died in the heavy snow that night at Yanliang Pass. There seems to be no difference between living and dead to him. He has become a dispensable person in this world. But once you come to this world, you have to leave something behind to prove that you existed. After thinking about it, other people's thoughts were like duckweed to him. He hoped that the only person who could remember him was Shen Yu. He was just a passerby to her, and he had to work very hard to make her remember him. He wanted her to remember him. Suanhui Hall is filled with a strong medicinal aura. Li Zhaonian was lying on the dragon couch, looking up at the high tent ceiling. The emperor's grandfather and father both died on this dragon couch. Kneeling at his feet was the eunuch, and Li Jiafeng sat on a chair very close to the couch in order to hear Li Zhaonian's weak words clearly. The imperial doctor will cure the emperor's brother, Li Jiafeng said. Li Zhaonian seemed to smile. I walked through the gate of hell once, and when I woke up, I found that this place is scarier than hell. The person next to him raised a knife towards him and rushed to kill him without any mercy. Li Zhaonian thought of the day when he and the queen got married. The queen was not the queen at that time, and he was still a prince with no power in his hands. Emperor Tongxue assigned him a marriage proposal and assigned him the legitimate daughter of the Chu family, the last member of the family, so that his father-in-law's family could become his backer, so that after Emperor Tongxue's funeral, he would not die if he did not fight for it. In the hands of other princes. In order to have children, the royal family always married young. He was only 15 that year. When she lifted her hijab, 14-year-old Mrs. Chu smiled at 15-year-old Li Zhaonian. She was very beautiful, with a pair of small pear dimples on her face and clean and clear eyes. At that time, he thought, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, and he will love her, respect her, and be good to her. Li Zhaonian worked hard, and except loving her, he did everything else. But it was the man he had promised to spend his life with who had poisoned his meal. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince author, Gigi. Chapter 255. Li Zhaonian's face turned pale. Jiafeng. Li Jiafeng came closer and said, Brother Emperor. Li Zhaonian looked at him, after I die, they will definitely not let you go. I can't protect you anymore. You can only do the rest. Brother Huang will not die. Li Jiafeng looked at Li Zhaonian and said again, just hold on a little longer and you won't die. Li Jiafeng had many brothers and many brothers died. He even watched Li Yanchang die in front of him without being moved. But now when he looked at the weak Li Zhaonian, he felt like there was a stone in his chest. Li Zhaoqing blinked lightly. I can't live long, I'm just hanging on for a breath. The border, Shen Yu. When you were in a coma, she won the battle at Yanliang Pass. She was very powerful, Li Jiafeng said. Li Zhaonian laughed. I've known for a long time that she can do it. He smiled for a while, then stopped smiling. Where's Xieting Zhou? Li Jiafeng paused for a moment and said, I haven't received any news about him going to Yanliang Pass yet. Then Shen Yu. Li Zhaonian struggled to get up, but was gently held down by Li Jiafeng. You have to believe in Shen Yu and Xieting Zhou, Li Jiafeng said. Li Zhaonian lay panting, help me, draft the decree. Li Jiafeng had already guessed Li Zhaonian's intention. Nandying is the last line of defense for Shengjing, and there is also a Marquis Xianping in the Great Zhou dynasty. Marquis Xianping has not mobilized troops yet, and they have not guessed his intentions. If Nandying goes to Yanliang Pass to support, Shengjing will become someone else's bag. Li Zhaonian looked dejected. Obviously everything was fine when my father was in power. Why did it become what it is now in my hands? What he said was a bit naive, but Li Jiafeng didn't make it clear. Li Jiafeng advised, the defeat at Yanliang Pass was the key to the demise of the Great Zhou dynasty. It is not your fault. We are unable to turn the tide. Li Zhaonian was tired and very weak. He closed his eyes and thought that maybe he would become the last emperor of the Zhou dynasty and the shortest-lived emperor. Li Jifeng got closer and heard Li Zhaonian's steady but weak breathing. He stood up and put down the bed curtain, stood beside the dragon couch for a moment, then lifted his feet and left. The black armor of the Qingyun guards was stretched out in the snow, and the edge could not be seen at a glance. The whole army was in order, and apart from the sound of the wind and the sound of marching troops in the snow, almost no one's words could be heard. Xietingzhou led 80,000 troops this time, 20,000 light cavalry advanced first, and the remaining heavy cavalry and infantry followed behind. They traveled day and night, more than 200 miles away from the north, and were heading towards Yanliang Pass. 11 Feng handed over the water and said, "Your Highness, please take a sip of hot water." Xietingzhou was ill and became even weaker in winter. Dr. Yu, who was accompanying the army, had warned him not to eat cold food. It was so cold that it was not easy for them to get a hot drink during the march. The cavalry had to run ahead and boil the water. When they caught up, the water was almost ready. Xietingzhou didn't even get off his horse, so he took the water and coughed several times after taking 2 sips. When he calmed down, he drank the water in the bowl and handed it to 11 Feng. Seeing this, Han Jiwu said, "Your Majesty, why don't you stop and take a rest?" "No need," Xietingzhou said, "continue marching." This time Han Jiwu accompanied the army and left Changhong in Bailin and 20,000 Qingyun guards as Bailin garrison. Xietingzhou always felt uneasy. He had read the military reports from the northwest. Shen Yu had a small victory. 11 Zhu had an overwhelming advantage in military strength, but he had not launched a general attack for a long time. He seemed to be waiting for something. Han Jiwu had already suggested to Xietingzhou that he could lead his troops to Yanliang Pass first, so that Xietingzhou would not have to rush, and it would not be too late to follow the heavy cavalry and infantry. However, this proposal was refuted by Xietingzhou at that time, and he was told not to mention it again. Han Jiwu looked at Xietingzhou worriedly, then turned to meet 11 Feng next to him. 11 Feng understood and immediately said, "Your Majesty, it will get dark soon. Kinky can't stand running like this. It's better to stop." Xietingzhou hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Han Jiwu immediately ordered, "The entire army rests and stops marching." The tents were quickly set up in the makeshift camp. Xietingzhou was sitting in the tent. 11 Feng brought hot water, twisted the handkerchief and handed it to Xietingzhou. Xietingzhou wiped his face and dipped his frozen hands into the warm water. "Bai Yu hasn't come back yet." "Not yet," Zifeng said, "it's flying north. Maybe it's hard to hunt in winter." Xietingzhou frowned, wiped his hands, and 11 Feng went out with the basin. As soon as the curtain came down, Xietingzhou heard a slight commotion outside, and then 11 Feng shouted outside, "Your Majesty! It's Bai Yu." When Xietingzhou heard something was wrong, he immediately opened the curtain and went out. 11 Feng had just picked up Bai Yu from the ground. "Your Majesty! Come in." Xietingzhou raised his hand to support the curtain, "Call doctor." 11 Feng rushed in quickly with Bai Yu in his arms, placed it on the simple couch that had been set up, then untied the letter tied to Bai Yu's leg and handed it to Xietingzhou. Xietingzhou placed a hand to comfort Bai Yu's undulating body, quickly scanned the brief letter, and then stopped. Xietingzhou's face was heavy. For a moment, his face showed confusion and uneasiness. "Your Majesty." Xietingzhou handed him the letter and said in a deep voice, "Beirong." He exhaled and quickly calmed down. The Beirong people crossed the snow-capped mountains and encountered a surprise attack in the north. At this moment, he finally understood what the Zihu people were waiting for. They are waiting for this winter snow. After the winter snow, the mountains will be closed by heavy snow, and Bailin and Beirong will enter a truce period. Xietingzhou will lead his troops to Yanliang Pass for reinforcements and to welcome back his princess. At this moment, Balin's combat power is at its weakest. The Beirong people can go straight to Balin as if they were entering uninhabited land. Xietingzhou, Shenyu, and even Dazhu will be attacked from both sides. Zihu and Beirong colluded. They stood on the same front and wanted to carve up this piece of fat during the chaos in the Great Zhou dynasty. Xietingzhou clenched his fists. Au, he called her name in his heart. This name that had brought him peace countless times was now like a sharp knife piercing his heart. If he continues to advance at this moment, he will be giving up the hundreds of thousands of people in Balin and Balin. The families and children of the soldiers are still there. But if he turned around and returned to Balin, he didn't dare to think about what the outcome would be. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, Reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince. Author, Gigi. Chapter 256. There was a strong wind and snow in Yanliangwen, which made the doors and windows creak. Shen Yu didn't sleep peacefully. Ever since she arrived at Yanliang Pass, she had had nightmares one after another, and she could not sleep until dawn one day. In the dream, Yanliang Pass was still raging with wind and snow. She had gradually become accustomed to the company of nightmares, and could look at the scene in front of her calmly in her dream. But this time it was different. She heard footsteps, as if someone was coming to watch the stream with her. Princess. Shen Yu was awakened by the howling, and when she sat up, she realized that the footsteps in her dream came from reality. She got out of bed, put on her coat, opened the door, and Changliu ran towards her. What happened? Shen Yu asked. Just as Changliu was about to speak, the two of them turned their heads and looked in the direction of the city gate. Drums and horns sounded. This was no ordinary enemy attack. The Zihu people are coming. Shen Yu quickly put on her clothes and armor, while telling Changliu, I'm going to the city gate. I may not have time to explain later. You wait here. If the city gate is lost, you ride on your fast horse and take Sixi to the north. Go, don't stay here. Changliu burst into tears when he heard Shen Yu's tone of explaining the funeral. No, princess, the prince will come, he must be on the way. Shen Yu smiled at him, I know. Changliu chased him out, I won't leave, the prince will come. Shen Yu stopped and reached out to pat his shoulder, be obedient. She got on her horse, and the sound of the horse's hooves was masked by the warning sound carried by the wind in the snow. The soldier got up from his bed and ran through the streets, heading in the same direction. When Shen Yu climbed up the city wall, it seemed as if the wind had stopped for a moment. Before they had time to observe the enemy's situation, there was a boom, and the city wall seemed to tremble slightly, and a heavy boulder hit the city wall. It's a trebuchet, the soldiers shouted, running among the splashing rubble. Princess, the Zihu people have launched a general attack. Shen Yu looked outside the pass. Continuous torches lit up half of the sky, extending into the distance until they disappeared into the vast wind and snow. The opportunity the Zihu people had been waiting for finally came. There are more than 100,000 Zihu soldiers, and the disparity in military strength is shocking enough just by looking at it. But Shen Yu couldn't flinch, or even look a little scared. Shen Yu calmed down and asked, has the smoke been lit? General Xiao has given the order, the soldier said, but... Shen Yu knew what was going on. The wind and snow were too heavy, and the beacon fire here might not be visible from the beacon tower 10 miles away. Besides, if the beacon is lit, whose reinforcements can be expected at this moment? The Xiao family's army from Chaihe will not come, and neither will the soldiers from South Camp. She knew that she couldn't place her hope on others. All they could do now was to hold on and delay as long as possible, waiting for Balin's rescue. Huge boulders hit the city wall one after another. The city wall of Yanliangwen was reinforced at the end of last year, and its thickness was increased from 15 meters to 25 meters. But the 25-meter thick city wall was still dented by the trebuchet attack, with bricks and gravel splashing everywhere. Shen Yu stood next to Xiao Chuan, supported the female wall and said, "They actually brought a battering ram and a trench bridge. We can't let them get close. They can suppress it as long as they can." Xiao Chuan looked serious, stared at the advancing Zihu army, and said firmly, "They also brought Lu Gong's car. It seems they have not discovered our intentions." A trench was dug outside the city. This time it was a serious trench, but time was tight. They worked day and night and could only dig 2 meters deep and 3 meters wide. There was no water diversion, and the trenches were filled with sharpened wooden stakes. But they did not expect that the narrow trenches would be able to block the attack of the Western Jew people. Shen Yu and Xiao Chuan looked into the distance together. The trebuchet threw the boulder into the sky, gradually getting bigger in their eyes, and then smashed against the wall. The female wall under Shen Yu's palm was trembling slightly, and she frowned. "The wind and snow are too strong." Xiao Chuan leaned against the wall and wiped the bow and arrow in his hand. "That's enough." Boda was riding a horse. He couldn't see clearly the people on the wall. The wind and snow were blowing the braids on his head, and his eyes were sharp. The deputy general rode on the side. "Chief, they actually want to use a trench to stop us. If they could dig a trench properly on the first day they arrived, they might be able to dig it wider, but they wasted too much time. Boda dare not underestimate the enemy. His current opponent is Shenzhongan's daughter, who has suppressed him and his father for more than 20 years. Shenzhongan built the copper and iron walls on the northwest defense line. It took Boda and his son more than 20 years to break through this line of defense. Now, Shenzhongan's young daughter has taken up this line of defense again. "Forward," Boda said word by word. "We must cross Yanliang Pass and take the rich land in the pass for my people. We no longer have to worry about not having food in winter." The trebuchets pressed behind, and the soldiers pushed forward with Lu Gong's chariot and battering ram. Shen Yu and Xiao Chuan stared straight ahead. Xiao Chuan set up his bow in the wind and snow. Beads of sweat appeared on Xiao Chuan's forehead. He was distracted by the heavy blow of the trebuchet, and his scattered mind could not be condensed no matter how hard he tried. The Zihu people's siege ram and Lu Gong's chariot were about to reach the line he drew with his bow and arrow. Xiao Chuan was still nervous. If they missed a hit, their shield soldiers would be alarmed and block all those behind them. Bow and arrow. Then their deployment would be in vain. A hand was placed on the shoulder, pressing down gently with a little weight. Xiao Chuan saw Shen Yu's weak but firm profile in his peripheral vision, and his heart suddenly miraculously settled down. Boda had a bad premonition in his heart, but he still didn't understand what it was. "Stop," Boda said, "I have an ominous premonition." The lieutenant waited quietly. His leader had extraordinary acumen for war and had led them to heights they had never reached before. He believed in Boda's judgment. Why did they stop? Xiao Chuan put down his bow. Could it be that they discovered it? Shen Yu said nothing. After a while, the Zihu army started moving again and continued to advance. Shen Yu breathed a sigh of relief. The heavy battering ram continued to move forward. Xiao Chuan's sharp eyes were fixed behind the bowstring. Boda looked at the city wall in the distance and said, "Maybe I've thought too much, and I'm not within the range of their bows and arrows." As soon as he finished speaking, the wooden plank made a crisp sound, and the front wheel of the battering ram sank. However, Lu Gong's car was too high, and it lost its balance and fell down. Screams rang out, and the Zihu soldiers walking in front of Lu Gong's car were crushed underneath. The soldier yelled, "Damn it! There are trenches here." It was more like a ditch than a trench. The ditch was not wide, less than 1 meter, but the entire front wheel of the battering ram was sunken. "Quick! Lift up!" The soldier jumped down from the ditch and tried to lift the battering ram on his shoulders. When he landed, his feet felt soft, and he vaguely smelled a different smell. "No. There is kerosene." Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, Reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince author, Gigi. Chapter 257. In the first battle they lost a few days ago, the scene of the Zihu soldiers being surrounded and killed by trenches and kerosene was still vivid in their minds. They still remembered the screams of their former partners in the flames and fighting. The soldiers suddenly panicked, and some were already preparing to climb out of the ditch. The deputy general rode forward and said, "Don't retreat. Pick up the cart and keep moving forward. This is not within their shooting range. No need to dash. Swift." There was a sound of breaking through the air, a sharp arrow pierced the ground, the trench burst into flames, and the soldiers in the trench were immediately burned to ashes. Cheers sounded from the distant city walls. Xiao Chuan put down his bow and arrow and touched his chest. "I'm scared to death." Shen Yu patted his shoulder and said, "It can be delayed for a while." The fire burned directly in front of the deputy general's face, and the horse was so frightened that it raised its front hooves. "Hum! Hum!" the deputy general scolded while controlling the horse. "Boss, it's a trap." Boda ordered, "Push the snow and put out the fire." The deputy general stopped the horse and returned to Boda. "Chief, they actually used the same trick." "A soldier never tires of deceit," Boda said. "I just didn't expect there to be someone with such great arm strength in their army." The snow was shoveled to cover the raging fire, which had no effect at first, but the ditch was not wide and the fire was gradually suppressed. The soldiers counted the casualties. There were dozens of burned soldiers, but they were just a drop in the bucket, but the front wheel of the battering ram had been burned. "They are trying to hold us back." 11 Jews' advance was indeed slowed down. The soldiers lifted the battering ram and dug soil to fill the ditch. Military craftsmen rushed to repair it. The deputy general said, "Leader, they are waiting for reinforcements from King Balin." "King Balin can't come," Boda said firmly. "Huanchuo will hold him back." "But what if the king of Balin gives up on Balin?" Boda was silent for a while on this question. "Then Huanchuo can enter the great Zhou dynasty from Balin, and they will be attacked from both sides. No matter where King Balin chooses to go, he must make a choice and abandon one side." The lieutenant said, "I hope he will return to Balin." Boda thought so too. If Xieting Zhou chooses to return to Balin, they will be the first to enter the great Zhou dynasty, and then negotiate distribution with Beirong, and they will have the upper hand. It was still dark, and this was a time for the garrison to breathe, and it was also a time for the Zihu people to rest. "Repair the battering ram and they will attack again." Shen Yu looked back at the north, which was her second home and where her lover lived. "The north will enter a truce period after it snows, but why does Boda wait until the truce period before launching an attack? It couldn't be Xieting Zhou he was waiting for, so what could it be? Is Xieting Zhou also in trouble like her? Will he come? Or can he come?" In the military tent, the doctor was treating Baiyu's injuries. The injury on Baiyu's body was not serious this time. A feather was scratched off one side of the wing, and the wound was relatively shallow. The military doctor said that the reason why it fell down was because it broke through the encirclement in the fight with other falcons and did not stop. They flew hundreds of miles in succession. It is the king of eagles and has never been at a disadvantage in battles with other falcons. This time it was probably attacked by falcons. There were other people in the tent, and Xieting Zhou stared at Baiyu intently. He gave himself some time. After the military doctor's treatment was completed, he had to make a decision. At this moment, Xieting Zhou must calm down and come up with the best and most beneficial countermeasures for them. The military doctor looked at the injury and found that there was no big problem. After a brief talk, he left the military tent. Xieting Zhou stroked Bai Yu's feathers with his hands. The king of eagles, even if injured, was not inferior. His eagle eyes were fixed on the other people in the tent, as if he was waiting for an answer like them. Xieting Zhou stopped and stood up, saying something softly. 11 Feng and Han Jiwo could not react at that time. After clarifying that sentence, Han Jiwo was shocked and said, "Your Majesty." Xieting Zhou raised his hand to stop what he was saying and said calmly, "Let's organize the army." Han Jiwo's throat was slightly choked, but Xieting Zhou, this is a military order. Zifeng could hear a bit of fatigue from Xieting Zhou's words. He had a lump in his throat and lowered his head in Bai Yu's eyes. "Do you think I'm too cold-blooded?" Xieting Zhou looked at a certain place in the void. Zifeng whispered, "The prince has his own difficulties, and the soldiers all understand." Xieting Zhou waved his hand towards him, lowered his head and buried his face in his palms. No one could see his expression, but Bai Yu saw his master bend his back and lower his shoulders. When the sky dawned, the wind and snow in Yanliang Pass did not stop, but the Qingyun guards were already on the road. The Zihu people rested their equipment and launched the attack again. The infantry in front had already entered the shooting range. Xiao Chuan raised his hand, "Fire the arrow! Fire the arrow!" The archer standing between the female walls had his bowstring fully drawn. At Xiao Chuan's order, the arrows rained down like dense rain. The Zihu infantry immediately retreated, with the rear shield soldiers at the forefront. The sound of arrows hitting the shields was heard, and the rain of arrows was stopped. This is not going to work. The consumption of arrows is too great, but the damage caused to the enemy is very small. The Zihu people are still advancing despite the casualties. A trench bridge was set up on the trench, and the Zihu soldiers rushed to the city with shields on their backs. Lu Gong's chariot and ladder frame were set up. The first batch of Zihu soldiers rushed up from the ladder. "Get on the rolling log. Hurry. The Zihu people are coming up." Iron nails were nailed on the rolling log, and there were ropes and iron chains on both ends of the log. The Zihu soldiers stared at the city wall, and when they were about to go up, a log with iron nails fell from the sky. The rolling wood rolled down the ladder, and the soldier who was climbing on the ladder fell from the ladder. "Damn it!" the deputy general heard the shouts of the soldiers in front. They added iron nails to the rolling logs. The garrison here was not happy. "There are too many of them. The one from behind is coming up again." They cut the rope of the log, "General." The Zihu soldiers were several times their strength. When one group fell, another group rose up. Shen Yu ran on the city wall. If any Western soldiers climbed up, she would chop down one of them. "You stupid Zihu, your mother," Xiao Chuan shouted with a knife, and chopped off the head of the Zihu who had just climbed up the city wall. "Spike," Shen Yu shouted, "go to the Wolf Fang." Boda looked at the melee ahead. There was no doubt that it was more difficult to attack the city than to defend it. However, there was a huge disparity in military strength and the Zhou people would not be able to hold on for long. Sacrifice was inevitable, but this sacrifice was slightly beyond his expectation. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, Reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince author, Gigi. Chapter 258. I can't stand it anymore, General. The soldiers pressed their backs against the heavy city gate. The city gate trembled under the violent impact again and again, shaking off the sand and stones. This is the northern capital. A few days ago, Xieting Zhou led his army to leave the royal capital and head west to Yanliang Pass. However, the Beirong people crossed the snowy mountains during the truce and launched an attack on the royal capital. This was unprecedented since the kings of Bailan guarded the northern border. What happened? Chang Hung led 20,000 Qingyun guards to fight against the enemy, but the Beirong offensive was fierce and the strength of the two sides was greatly disparity. They retreated all the way to the royal capital, but they were still allowed to attack the city gate. Boom! There was another violent impact, and the iron birch city gate made a slight click. The soldiers saw a crack in the thick latch. "General, the city gate is about to be broken down." Chang Hung gritted his teeth and couldn't bear it anymore. He knew it very well. It was a blessing to have carried it for a few days. The Beirong people were too damn numerous. They carried it until now to buy as much time as possible for the people of the royal capital to evacuate. "Move the things," Chang Hung shouted, "move the tables, chairs, beds, and stools to fill the street." They used tables, chairs, and benches to block the city entrance. If the city was destroyed, they would burn the road with fire to prevent them from advancing. This is Chang Hung's last resort to stop the Zihu people, and there is no other way. Chang Hung knew that the prince had gone to rescue Yan Liang Pass, and they would have no reinforcements. If the soldiers could hold on for a moment longer, the people would be able to evacuate more and escape farther. The sound of horse hooves trampled on the street. "Let them go back," shouted the man on the horse. Chang Hung turned around and saw the old prince riding on a horse, holding the long spear that once swept across the northern battlefield. "It's the old prince! The old prince!" The voices of soldiers sounded all around. Xie Guangzong smiled in the wind. "Why add the word? They call me old." Chang Hung hurriedly stepped forward. "Didn't the prince lead the people to evacuate? How can he come back again?" In his prime, Xie Guangzong was a person who frightened Beirong. Later, his son inherited his mantle. Xie Tingzhou was more talented than him and was more tactically flexible than him. But what Xie Guangzong is most dissatisfied with is the old character. Xie Guangzong lowered his body on the horse and looked at Chang Hung, his eyes still full of pressure. "Beirong is my defeated general. I will not retreat. The people have evacuated. I will fight them today. Qingyun Guard, swear to the death to follow the prince and kill the enemy. The city gate is about to be breached. Everyone, please move back," Xie Guangzong ordered. The Qingyun guards blocked the street. In front of them, the former Balan king who would never back down was immediately at the forefront. Xie Guangzong has guarded the north for decades, and throughout his life as a soldier, he has long since tempered his preference for death over surrender into his bones and blood. He will not retreat, he will fight until the last moment. Boom! The city gate was struck again by a crash. The streets of the royal capital were very quiet, and all the soldiers of Qingyun Guard made no sound. Boom! Their eyes were fixed, staring ahead. Boom! Xie Guangzong slowly raised the spear in his hand and pointed it directly at the city gate. "Soldiers! Follow me and fight dash!" Boom! The city gate fell down with a loud bang on the ground. Xie Guangzong took the lead and rushed forward in the hunting north wind. The old prince's hair was white at the temples, and the traces of time had climbed onto his face, but they had not been able to erode his eyes that held the edge of sharp blades. He has carried the northern defense line for half his life, and his dream is to travel through mountains and rivers, but as long as there is an invasion by foreign enemies, he will still stand here. The clash of weapons made a sound, and the sound of killings filled the streets at the city gate. The Qingyun guards were like a wall blocking here, allowing the Beirong people to see their edge during the confrontation. Densely packed Beirong people rushed in from the city gate and fell down at the city gate. Qingyun guards also fell. The Beirong people continued to surge forward like a wave, but the city gates and streets were not wide enough to surround the Qingyun guards, so they could only attack from the front. There was a steady stream of Beirong soldiers outside the city. The spear in Xie Guangzong's hand pierced the bodies of countless Beirong people. Chang Hung fought with his sword, cutting down the enemy soldiers who came forward one after another. Looking back, Chang Hung saw the Beirong men cutting off the legs of Xie Guangzong's horse, and Xie Guangzong rolled to the ground. "Prince," Chang Hung wanted to rush over. Xie Guangzong rolled aside, and the Beirong man's scimitar struck the place where he had just fallen. Behind, Xie Guangzong shouted. A knife grazed Chang Hung's temple. Chang Hung turned around and saw the knife piercing the head of the Beirong man behind him. "Ha ha!" Xie Guangzong laughed and said while beating him, "I want you to save me, so take care of yourself." Laughter soared into the sky, and King Yunwei's face actually showed a smile amid Xie Guangzong's laughter. "It's cool," Chang Hung chopped off the arm of a Beirong man. The passage at the city gate was piled with corpses like a hill. The bodies of the Beirong people pressed against the bodies of King Yun guards, and the King Yun guards pressed against the Beirong people. The King Yun guards retreated during the fight. They all knew that this battle would be lost, but they all wanted to kill one more Beirong man. Xie Guangzong suddenly held the scimitar of a Beirong man. He felt the opponent's strength and his arms were pressed down. The man was young, burly, and physically strong. He was the son of Shanyu Beirong. The former god of war has grown old, and he cannot stop the young Beirong general. Xie Guangzong was slashed on the shoulder during the melee and suffered multiple injuries on his body, but he felt no pain and was still fighting the enemy. Chang Hung touched Xie Guangzong's side and fought with him. He couldn't let the old prince die here. "Old prince." When Xie Guangzong heard the familiar voice, before he could turn around, Chang Hung pushed him back and quickly pushed him to the King Yun guard behind him. He said with heavy breathing, "You two take the old prince away." Chang Hung and the remaining King Yun guards blocked the way of the Beirong people, and he heard the sound of horse hooves receding. "Kill the enemy," Chang Hung roared and waved his knife. The sound of horse hooves faded away and gradually got closer again. Your mother. What are you doing back here?" Chang Hung finished scolding, but suddenly felt something was wrong. The sound of horse hooves was getting closer and closer, like the roar of thunder. "It's reinforcements," King Yun guard shouted. The black armored cavalry came over from the street, and the dense iron hooves made the ground tremble slightly. The biting north wind made Xie Tingzhu's cloak whistle. He reined up his horse in the middle of the long street and looked at the leader of Beirong through the fighting crowd. "Hu, Yan, Tuo," Xie Tingzhu said every word. Huanchuo laughed on the horse, "Long time no see, thank you Tingzhu. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, Reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince. Author, Gigi. Chapter 259. They were once powerful enemies on the battlefield in the north. Huanchuo's father was defeated by Xie Guangzong, and his son Huanchuo was also defeated by Xie Tingzhu. Huanchuo smiled particularly evilly, "You are back unexpectedly. Is Yanliang Pass about to be destroyed?" Cracks finally appeared on Xie Tingzhu's face. "The people of the Zhou dynasty are indeed ruthless," Huanchuo said. "You gave up your wife and left her on the northwest border. I heard that your wife is very beautiful. Let me guess what Boda will do to her. Defeated women will never be as lucky as men. They can't die even if they want to, but will become livestock under men's crotches. They will tear her clothes to pieces, and then..." Xie Tingzhu drew out his sword and leapt forward. He knew Huanchuo was deliberately irritating him, but he couldn't bear it. Huanchuo wanted to break into the Zhou dynasty from here when Balin lost the shield of King Yun guard, but he did not expect that Xie Tingzhu would leave 20,000 people behind. Xie Tingzhu came back for reinforcements. Even if Huanchuo's attack failed, fighting again would only be a waste. "Retreat," Huanchuo stared and said. He rode his horse and led the Beirong soldiers back. "King Yun guard, follow me in pursuit," Han Jiwu said loudly on his horse. They had planned their tactics on the way back, and the left and right wings had already bypassed the east and west gates to outflank them. The streets were in a mess, the snow turned red, and the stone roads were soaked with blood. Only when Chang Hung stopped did he feel that his whole body was exhausted, and he sat down on the stone steps beside the street. Xie Guangzhong came on horseback. When he got off his horse, he knocked Chang Hung on the head, causing his helmet to clang. "You dare to let people take me away? Do you see clearly? I am your old prince." Chang Hung took off his helmet and said, "If you weren't the old prince, I wouldn't be like this." Xie Tingzhou saw Xie Guangzong's broken armor and ordered the military doctor to come forward to bandage it. Xie Guangzong still wanted to show off, but seeing the expression on Xie Tingzhou's face, he did not dare to speak. Xie Tingzhou walked onto the city wall, but none of the guards dared to follow him. Chang Hung grabbed a guard and asked, "How many Qingyun guards have come back?" The guard said, 78,000 people. 78,000. Chang Hung muttered and repeated, and then said, "Zifeng didn't come back." "Zifeng is taking 2,000 kinki to Yanliang Pass," said the guard. 2,000 kinki are enough." Xie Guangzong sat on the edge and bared his teeth as he asked the military doctor to look at his injuries. "There are more than 100,000 Zihu people. What can those 2,000 people do?" Chang Hung looked up at the city wall and wiped his face again. Xie Guangzong glanced at him and said, "Oh yo, come on, the cat urine has come out, why are you crying? It's no use to me. I have to ask the prince to come back for reinforcements." Chang Hung has shallow eye sockets and is a tall and rough man who loves to shed tears. Xie Guangzong said, "Don't take responsibility for yourself. With 20,000 people, I wouldn't have been able to fight this battle when I was young." Chang Hung's hands were full of blood, and his face turned into a painted face as he wiped his tears. "What should I do with the princess?" Xie Guangzong was silent, and after a long while he said, "I hope Yanliang Pass can last longer. We will fight here quickly and fight back the Beirong people before we go to rescue my daughter-in-law." Xie Tingzhou squinted his eyes in the wind on the city wall. The 2,000 men thrown into the battlefield were of little use, but he hoped that Zifeng could bring her back safely. Xie Tingzhou gave an order to Zifeng before leaving. She would not abandon the city and flee. If necessary, she would even be knocked unconscious. She also wants to bring her back. The war at Yanliangwen continued intermittently for 3 days. During these 3 days, the Zihu attacked again and again, only to be blocked by them again and again. While 11 Jews troops were being depleted, the garrison in the city was also being depleted. The Zihu people could not attack from the front, so they wanted to use infantry to advance and dig loose the foundation under the city wall, intending to use a trebuchet to smash through a city wall. This plan did not succeed, but the trebuchet attacks continued, and the speed of repairing the wall could not match the speed of the trebuchet smashing the wall. If this continued, the city wall would one day be broken through. "How is the evacuation of the people going?" Shen Yu asked. Shen Yu was in a mess, but Cao Guangjin standing in front of her was still well dressed. "We are already evacuating one after another." Cao Guangjin heard the sound of trebuchets hitting the city wall again, and he worried, "I wonder how long this can last. Just organize the people to evacuate in an orderly manner, and don't let others take advantage of the chaos to steal and rob." Cao Guangjin nodded, "Well, I'll go down first. It was too dangerous here at the city gate. The rumbling sounds could shake people's hearts." Cao Guangjin didn't want to stay there for a moment. Shen Yu returned to the temporary meeting hall under the city wall. She was so tired that she sat on the bench and leaned against the wall to take a nap. Chang Lu came to deliver meals to Shen Yu and Xiao Chuan. When he found Shen Yu in the meeting hall, she was asleep with her head tilted to one side. Her face was a little dirty, her eyes were black and blue, and she looked extremely tired. Chang Liu didn't wake her up. When he saw that the charcoal basin in the room was out, he went to find some charcoal to light it and held the food box in his arms for fear of getting cold. How heartbroken it would be if the prince saw it. Chang Liu's eyes turned red. The prince told him to take good care of the princess when he asked him to follow her, but he failed to take good care of her. Shen Yu could fall asleep despite the sound of the trebuchet, but was awakened by a slight sobbing. She saw Chang Liu staring at the charcoal basin, tears falling down. Long stay. Chang Liu wiped his eyes carelessly and handed the food box that was still warm in his arms to Shen Yu. Princess, eat quickly, it will cool down later. Have you eaten? Shen Yu asked warmly. Chang Liu nodded with tears in his eyes. Shen Yu opened the food box and started eating. In the past 2 days, Chang Liu and Sixi helped the people evacuate. Cao Guangjin arranged for Shen Yu's maid Shen Yu to evacuate with her family. When it was time to eat, Sixi cooked rice and Chang Liu delivered it. This year's situation is much better than last year. At least there is enough food in the city. The court has not allocated any money. However, the Lu family in the pass is constantly sending food and armaments to the border, and money is flowing out like snowflakes. Are you crying because you are scared? Chang Liu shook his head hurriedly. I'm not afraid. Shen Yu said, it's okay to be afraid, you are still a child. What about the princess? Chang Liu asked with red eyes. The princess is not much older than me. I'm probably 3 or 4 years older than you know. Chang Liu didn't understand what this meant. Why hasn't the prince come yet? It's been snowing for so long. Shen Yu lowered her eyes. He must have been tripped up by something. He will come, Chang Liu. Ah, Chang Liu looked at her. Shen Yu paused. I have a few letters and I don't want to hand them over to anyone else. You can take Sixi and set out tomorrow to deliver the letters for me. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Treating the concubine, eliminating the wife, Reborn, I refuse to marry the scumbag and marry the prince. Author, Gigi. Chapter 260. Chang Liu didn't agree or speak. He just looked at Shen Yu steadily, with a terrible guess in his heart about what the letter was. I won't leave, Chang Liu said after a long time. You can let Si-11 send her off. I have to listen to the prince and take care of the princess here. Let's wait for the prince to come together. Shen Yu's throat felt sore, and she pretended to be serious. He asked you to listen to me, do you listen? Listen, Chang Liu said, but I'm not stupid. You want to take me away? Don't you want to go back and see your little turtle? I thought about it. Chang Liu lowered his head and said, I want to go back with the princess to see the little turtle. Chang Liu shed tears again as he spoke. If the city is really destroyed, I will carry the princess on my back and leave. I am very good at Qinggong and no one can catch up with me. Shen Yu sighed softly and listened to the sound of gunfire outside. She now finally understood why her father insisted on fighting no matter how she tried to stop him. That was the military spirit engraved in his bones. There is a fire burning in the bodies of the soldiers. If the fire is not extinguished, they will not retreat. Now, she will not retreat because Shenzhongan's blood is flowing in her body. I can't leave, and the soldiers can't abandon the city and flee, but Chang Liu, you are still young. Chang Liu just shook his head. I helped evacuate the people, but many people refuse to leave. There are wars here all year round. Why don't they move to other places? Because this is their home, Shen Yu said slowly. No one is willing to leave their homeland unless they have to. They have food to eat and land to grow here, but they become refugees in other places, and they are not necessarily safe on the road. Everyone is just trying to survive. There are also people who don't think so, Chang Liu muttered. Shen Yu tilted her head. Huh. Cao Dadu, Chang Liu said. Cao Guangjin is already packing his bags. I saw many carriages parked in his backyard. He is preparing to abandon the city and escape. The people can evacuate, but Cao Guangjin cannot escape. As a parent official, if he escapes first, the people will be afraid and may cause riots. Shen Yu gave the food box to Chang Lu, but she also had to arrange for someone to keep an eye on Cao Guangjin to prevent him from running away. The wind and snow outside made it impossible to see the road. Han Jiwu dismounted and threw his helmet on the ground when he entered the tent. "Your Majesty, Huanchuo bullies the weak and fears the strong, and will not fight us head-on." Han Jiwu fought very hard in these successive battles. When they caught up with the Beirong people, they retreated. Once they stopped pursuing, the Beirong led a small group of light cavalry to harass them and started a guerrilla fight with them. Xietings, whose eyes were dark, "They want to hold us back and give Boda enough time to break through the city." Han Jiwu and Chang Hung looked at each other. They did not dare to ask about the situation at Yanliang Pass, for fear that mentioning the princess would upset the prince. It was very warm in the camp, and the snow on Han Jiwu's body and eyebrows turned into water. He stretched out his hand and wiped his face and said, "We can't afford to delay, we must fight quickly, and we have to find a way." The lamp oil in the military tent was replenished again, but a countermeasure had not yet been discussed. Xieting Zhou was in poor health in the winter and had been traveling for several days. Dr. Yu said that his physical condition was not very good and he needed to recuperate. Chang Hung and Han Jiwu did not want to disturb his rest, so they exited the military tent and returned to their own tents. After a while, I heard the sound of horse hooves. When I went out to take a look, I saw Xieting Zhou, wearing a big cloak and leading his guards on horseback, out of the camp through the wind and snow. "Your Majesty," Chang Hung shouted after him, but his voice was drowned in the wind and snow. Xieting Zhou didn't look back at all. "With such heavy snow, will the prince return to the palace?" Chang Hung asked worriedly. Han Jiwu's expression was heavy as the two of them walked into the military tent and said, "The prince can't sleep in the camp. I guess it will be better if he returns to the palace. After all, it is the home of the prince and princess." While the goat milk was heating up on the stove, Han Jiwu poured a bowl for Chang Hung. "You don't know, the prince ordered to return to Bailin that night." I was shocked. I thought the prince would send half of his troops to rescue, but he only sent 2,000, but what should the princess do? The prince is thinking about the soldiers and the people, but he is taking his own life. I really can't think that he has pushed himself to this point. Han Jiwu shook his head helplessly and said, "What should the prince do if something happens to the princess?" Chang Hung held the bowl but did not drink. On the surface, the prince seemed fine, but I heard from the guards that he couldn't eat for the past few days and couldn't sleep at night. Some people even saw the prince walking back and forth in the yard in the middle of the night. Both fell silent. Xieting Zhou made the decision he should make as the king of Bailin, and no matter what decision he made, he would be criticized. Regardless of whether he gives up his wife or the people, he will be called cold-blooded and ruthless. Early the next morning, the generals and staff were in the meeting hall. Zifeng and Qingyun guards were blocked by Xianping Ho on the way to Yanliang Pass. The numbers were so disparate that they couldn't fight head-on, so they had to hide in the mountains with 2,000 Qingyun guards. They wanted to go around. Fortunately, Nanda Wei the battalion arrived in time and held off Xianping Hao. Chang Hung scolded, "This Marquis Xianping, I asked him why he rested for so long. It turned out that he was waiting here, but why did the imperial court suddenly mobilize troops again?" One of the officials said, "This time, we have to thank Zhang Ji, the Minister of Household Affairs." Han Jiwu said, "Sir, please give me some advice." The staff member said, "Don't take this advice seriously. Zhang Ji originally went to Yanliang Pass to negotiate peace. Emperor Yongning was seriously ill in the capital. The elder Zhang Yuanqing also fell ill after he prepared a coffin and wrote a letter. It is said that Zhang Ji rushed back to Sheng from Yanliang Pass without stopping. In Beijing, I only saw Mr. Ge for the last time. On that day, Zhang Ji entered the palace and knelt down to Emperor Yongning to ask for the troops to be sent to Suanpinghao. That's because Mr. Zhang Ji gave the task to Zhang Ji before he died. The staff member touched his beard and said, "It is unknown what Mr. Ge discussed with him before he died." Chang Hung thought for a moment, but hasn't the imperial court been crying about being poor and having no money? The staff said, "The family has been standing for hundreds of years with the great Zhou dynasty, and the wealth accumulated cannot be underestimated." Zhang Ji requested that the wealth accumulated by the Zhang family for several generations be used as military expenses for the Nanda camp. Someone in the room gasped. He didn't expect that the aristocratic family was so rich. The staff member added, "Zhang Ji can be considered a figure. Someone in the Zhang family is dissatisfied with this. It is said that he was the master of the third room. That man died suddenly at home that night. Everyone knows who did it, but there is no evidence to accuse Zhang Ji. There is nothing you can do, this is just killing the chicken to scare the monkey, and no one will dare to object again." Chang Hung nodded, "Ruthless man."